In the cold darkness of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, a group of scientists worked tirelessly inside a small research station. The station was buried deep under layers of ice, far from Earth and its bustling cities. It was a place where silence ruled, broken only by the hum of machines and the occasional voice of someone sharing new findings. Among the team were two key members: Dr. Alan Grant, a geologist with years of experience studying alien landscapes, and Dr. Laura Bennett, a biologist who had spent her career searching for signs of life beyond Earth. The mission had started like any other. The team drilled into the thick ice, hoping to find water or traces of ancient organisms. But what they discovered was far stranger than anyone could have imagined. Deep beneath the frozen surface, they uncovered something that didn't belong to Earth or any known world. It was a fossil, but unlike anything they had ever seen. The creature had multiple limbs, some ending in delicate tendrils, while others were tipped with sharp, crystalline structures. Its body seemed to shimmer faintly, even after being locked in ice for millions of years. Alan stared at the fossil, his breath fogging up the visor of his helmet. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "It looks engineered." Laura knelt beside him, her gloved hands brushing against the icy surface. "Engineered? You mean like it was designed?" She tilted her head, studying the intricate patterns etched into the creature's exoskeleton. Or maybe evolved to look that way. The discovery sent ripples through the team. They worked around the clock, carefully extracting the fossil and bringing it back to the lab inside the station. As they examined it more closely, they realized there were more fossils nearby, dozens of them, scattered across the area. Each one showed signs of intelligence, with tools and strange devices embedded in the ice alongside them. These weren't just animals, Laura said one night as she leaned over her notes. They were thinkers, builders, maybe even explorers. But excitement soon turned to unease. Strange things began happening in the lab. Equipment would turn on by itself, lights flickering without explanation. One day, Jake Miller, a young engineer on the team, swore he heard whispers coming from the corner of the room. When he turned to look, no one was there. "It's probably just stress," Alan told him, though his tone lacked confidence. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Even Laura noticed it. Her dreams had become vivid and unsettling, filled with images of towering structures and shadowy figures moving silently through the dark. Then came the artifact. While cataloging the fossils, Laura found something unusual, a smooth, pulsating orb hidden among the remains. It glowed faintly, shifting colors as if alive. Despite warnings from Alan to leave it alone, Laura felt drawn to it. Her hand reached out before she could stop herself, and the moment her fingers touched the surface, everything changed. The room grew colder, and a low hum filled the air. The lights dimmed, then surged back to life. Everyone froze, staring at the orb as it pulsed faster, almost like a heartbeat. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Something ancient and powerful had been awakened. Later, as the team sat together in the cramped dining area, Alan broke the silence. "What did you do, Laura?" His voice was calm, but carried an edge of frustration. She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "I don't know. I just felt like I had to touch it." Jake laughed nervously. "Well, whatever it was, I hope it doesn't come back to bite us." No one else laughed. They all knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Back on Earth, news of the discovery spread quickly. At first it was just rumors, whispers among scientists and researchers who had heard about strange findings on Europa. But soon, details leaked to the public. Pictures of the fossils appeared online, blurry but unmistakable. People were fascinated and scared at the same time. Talk shows debated whether the creatures were friendly or dangerous. Conspiracy theories flourished, with some claiming the fossils were fake, while others insisted they were proof of alien life watching humanity. Governments around the world scrambled to respond. Meetings were held in secret, and military leaders discussed what this could mean for Earth's safety. The team on Europa, however, didn't know any of this. They were too busy dealing with the growing tension inside their own station. Laura couldn't stop thinking about the orb. Since she touched it, things had only gotten stranger. The whispers Jake mentioned weren't just in his head. They were real. Others started hearing them too, faint voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. No one understood the words, but the sound sent chills down their spines. It felt like something, or someone, was trying to communicate. One night, Laura decided to try something risky. She took the orb into a small lab and set it on a table. Carefully, she placed sensors around it, hoping to record any changes in energy or movement. Then she sat down, closed her eyes, and focused. For a moment, nothing happened. Just as she began to think it was a waste of time, the room grew colder. The orb started glowing brighter, its colors shifting rapidly. A sharp buzzing filled the air, making her ears ring. Suddenly, images flooded her mind. She saw vast landscapes unlike anything on Earth, towering structures made of light, oceans that shimmered with impossible colors. And then she saw battles. Explosions tore through the skies, and creatures fought desperately against an unseen enemy. In the middle of it all were humans, or at least beings that looked human. They carried weapons and shouted orders, their faces twisted with anger. Laura gasped and pulled her hand away. The orb dimmed, and the buzzing stopped. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of what she'd seen. Was it a memory? A warning? She didn't know, but one thing was clear. The orb wasn't just an object. It was alive, or at least connected to something alive. When Alan found out what she'd done, he was furious. "You can't keep doing things like this," he snapped, pacing back and forth in the lab. "We don't know what that thing is capable of." "I know," Laura said quietly, "but we can't ignore it either. Don't you see? This could be our chance to learn something incredible." Alan shook his head. "Or it could kill us." The argument ended without resolution, leaving both of them frustrated. Tensions continued to rise within the team. Jake, who had always been easygoing, became withdrawn. He spent hours staring out at the icy landscape, muttering to himself. One day, he disappeared during a routine exploration outside the station. When the others went looking for him, all they found were footprints leading to a jagged crack in the ice and strange symbols carved into the surface nearby. No one knew what to make of it. Some thought Jake had fallen into the crevasse, while others suspected something more sinister. Laura examined the symbols closely and realized they matched patterns she'd seen in the orb's glow. Whatever had taken Jake, it was connected to the artifact. That night, Laura stayed up late, studying the orb again. This time, she didn't touch it. Instead, she watched as it pulsed softly, almost like it was breathing. She wondered if the silence, the name she'd given the creatures, were still out there, watching and waiting. Or maybe they were already here, lurking in the shadows of the station, whispering to whoever would listen. As she turned off the lights and left the lab, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The days that followed Jake's disappearance were tense and unsettling. The team tried to focus on their work, but it was impossible to ignore the growing sense of unease. Everyone felt it. The strange hum in the air, the flickering lights, the distant whispers that seemed to echo through the station's walls. No one talked about it openly, but they all knew something was wrong. Laura spent most of her time with the orb, studying it closely. She couldn't explain why, but she felt drawn to it, as if it were calling out to her. Alan watched her from a distance, his frustration mounting. He didn't trust the artifact, or Laura's obsession with it. "You're playing with fire," he told her one evening when they crossed paths in the hallway. "We don't know what this thing is capable of." "I'm not playing," Laura replied, her voice firm. "I'm trying to understand. If we just shut it out, we'll never learn anything." Alan shook his head and walked away without another word. He wanted to believe Laura was right, but deep down, he feared she was making a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, the rest of the team began to notice changes, not just in the station, but in themselves. Conversations grew shorter, more strained. Small disagreements turned into heated arguments. Even tasks that used to be simple, like analyzing data or repairing equipment, became harder to focus on. It was as if the orb was affecting their minds, planting seeds of doubt and paranoia. One morning, Sarah Wells, a technician, burst into the lab where Laura was working. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she held up a tablet. "Look at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Laura took the tablet and stared at the screen. It showed readings from the sensors placed around the station. Energy levels were spiking in random areas, far beyond anything they'd seen before. "What does it mean?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Laura admitted, but she had a sinking feeling. Something was waking up, something powerful. That night, things got worse. As the team gathered for dinner, the lights suddenly went out. For a few seconds, there was complete darkness. Then, one by one, the lights came back on, but they weren't normal. They pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of the orb's glow. And then the whispers started again, louder this time, filling the room like a chorus of voices. "Make it stop," someone shouted, covering their ears, but no one knew how. The sound was everywhere, inside their heads and outside, impossible to block out. Laura stood up, her heart pounding. She knew what she had to do. Ignoring the protests of the others, she ran back to the lab where the orb was kept. When she entered, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The orb was glowing brighter than ever, its surface rippling like liquid. Without hesitating, Laura reached out and touched it again. Instantly, the whispers stopped. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the orb. Images flooded her mind once more, this time clearer, sharper. She saw the silence, alive and moving, their crystalline bodies shimmering in the light. They were surrounded by machines, tools, and structures unlike anything on Earth. And then she saw humans, or beings that looked human, attacking them, destroying everything in their path. Tears streamed down Laura's face as she pulled her hand away. She understood now. The silence hadn't just died. They had chosen to end themselves rather than fight back. They had seen the destruction humanity could bring and decided it wasn't worth the risk. When she returned to the dining area, the others were waiting for her. Their faces were filled with fear and anger. "What did you do?" Alan demanded. "I didn't do anything," Laura said softly. "They're showing us who they were and why they're gone." No one spoke. They all knew the truth now. Whatever the silence were, they weren't just aliens. They were a warning. And the warning was meant for humanity. When news of the strange events on Europa reached Earth, governments and space agencies scrambled to respond. A rescue mission was quickly organized, led by Commander Rachel Monroe, a calm and experienced astronaut known for handling high-pressure situations. Rachel had spent years in space, but nothing could have prepared her for what awaited her on Europa. As her spacecraft approached the icy moon, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The reports she'd read were fragmented, mentions of an artifact, whispers, and missing crew members, but no clear explanation. When she finally landed and stepped into the research station, the atmosphere hit her immediately. It was heavy, charged with tension. The remaining team looked exhausted, their faces pale and eyes hollow. Alan greeted her first. "You shouldn't have come," he said bluntly. His voice was low, almost defeated. "It's not safe here." Rachel ignored his warning and turned to Laura, who stood nearby, clutching a notebook tightly. "Tell me what's going on," Rachel said firmly. Laura hesitated, but eventually began explaining. She spoke about the fossils, the orb, and the visions she'd seen when she touched it. She described how the team had started hearing whispers and how Jake had vanished without a trace. As she talked, Rachel noticed the others shifting uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. They didn't want to believe Laura's story, but deep down, they knew it was true. Rachel decided to see the orb for herself. When she entered the lab where it was kept, she felt a chill run down her spine. The orb sat on a table, glowing faintly, its surface rippling like water. It was beautiful, yet unsettling. Rachel stared at it, fighting the urge to reach out and touch it. She understood why Laura had been so drawn to it. It seemed alive, as if it were waiting for something. Back in the main area of the station, Rachel called a meeting. "We need to figure out what this thing is and what it wants," she said. "But we can't let fear divide us. We're stronger together." Her words seemed to ease some of the tension, but not everyone agreed. Alan argued that the orb was dangerous and should be destroyed before it caused more harm. Laura, on the other hand, believed it held answers humanity desperately needed. The team was split, and the debate grew heated. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She wandered through the silent corridors of the station, her mind racing. When she passed the lab, she stopped. The orb was glowing brighter than before, pulsing rhythmically. Against her better judgment, she stepped inside and sat down in front of it. Closing her eyes, she focused on the hum filling the room. At first, there was nothing. Then, slowly, images began to form in her mind. She saw vast star systems, planets teeming with life, and civilizations working together in harmony. But then the vision shifted. She saw destruction, worlds burning, species dying out, entire ecosystems collapsing. And always in the background were humans. Their faces were filled with determination, but also greed and violence. Rachel gasped and opened her eyes. Her heart was pounding, and sweat dripped down her forehead. She realized now why the Silents had chosen to end themselves. They hadn't just been running from humanity. They had been protecting the galaxy from it. The next morning, Rachel shared what she'd seen with the team. Some listened quietly, while others dismissed it as stress or imagination. But Laura nodded, her expression serious. "They're trying to tell us something," she said. "They're showing us what we could become if we don't change." Rachel agreed. "We can't destroy the orb," she said firmly. "Not yet. If we do, we'll lose our chance to understand them, and ourselves." Alan shook his head, clearly frustrated. "And if we keep it, we might lose everything." The argument ended without resolution, leaving the team divided. Outside, the icy landscape stretched endlessly, cold and unyielding. Inside, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. Whatever choice they made, one thing was certain. The orb wasn't just an object, it was a test, and humanity's future depended on how they responded. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. The team argued constantly, their voices echoing through the narrow corridors of the station. Alan insisted the orb was too dangerous to keep, while Laura believed it held the key to understanding the Silents, and perhaps even humanity's place in the universe. Rachel tried to mediate, but her efforts only seemed to deepen the divide. One evening, as the team gathered in the lab to discuss their next steps, the orb began to glow brighter than ever before. Its pulsing light filled the room, casting strange shadows on the walls. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent this time. Everyone froze, unsure of what to do. "We need to shut it down," Alan said, his voice trembling. "Whatever this thing is, it's controlling us." "No," Laura shouted, stepping closer to the orb. "It's not controlling us, it's trying to communicate." Before anyone could stop her, Laura reached out and touched the orb again. The room erupted in a blinding flash of light, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then, one by one, the team members collapsed to the floor, clutching their heads. Rachel was the first to recover. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. Her mind felt different, as if it had been stretched and reshaped. Fragments of images lingered, vast cities built from light, oceans that shimmered with impossible colors, and battles fought across stars. She realized these weren't just random visions. They were memories. The silence memories. Laura sat up slowly, her face pale but determined. "They're showing us their story," she whispered. "Everything they did. And why." As the others regained consciousness, they began to share what they'd seen. Each person had experienced something slightly different, but the overall message was clear. The Silents had once been guardians of balance in the galaxy, using their advanced abilities to maintain harmony among species. But when humanity's ancestors arrived, an aggressive, expansionist race, they saw the destruction that would follow. Rather than fight back, the Silents chose to end themselves, leaving behind artifacts like the one in the lab as a warning. "It's not just about us," Rachel said quietly, piecing it all together. "It's about what we could become if we don't change." Alan looked at her, his expression conflicted. "You mean it's a test?" "Yes," Laura replied. "A test to see if we've learned anything. If we destroy the orb, we'll prove we're still the same violent species the Silents feared. But if we listen—" Her voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. The team sat in silence, each person grappling with the weight of the decision ahead. Outside, the icy landscape stretched endlessly, cold and unyielding, a reminder of how fragile life truly was. Later that night, Rachel found herself alone in the lab, staring at the orb. It pulsed softly, almost like it was waiting. She thought about everything she'd seen. The beauty of the Silence world, the devastation caused by humanity's greed, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, people could be better. Reaching out hesitantly, she placed her hand on the orb. This time, the connection was stronger, more vivid. She saw two paths stretching into the future. One led to destruction, Earth consumed by its own greed, the galaxy scarred by humanity's mistakes. The other path was harder to see, shrouded in uncertainty, but it glimmered faintly with the promise of growth and change. When Rachel pulled her hand away, tears streamed down her face. She knew what had to be done. The Silents weren't just warning humanity. They were offering a chance to rewrite their story. Whether or not they took it was up to them. The next morning, Rachel called the team together. "We can't destroy the orb," she said firmly. "Not yet. We need to figure out what it's trying to teach us. If we don't, we'll lose more than just this artifact. We'll lose ourselves." No one argued. For the first time since the mission began, they were united, not by fear, but by hope. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The decision to keep the orb was met with both relief and unease. The team knew they were taking a huge risk, but they also understood that destroying it would mean giving up on the chance to learn from the Silence. Rachel took charge, determined to find a way to communicate with the artifact, or whatever consciousness lay within it. "We can't just wait for it to show us more," Rachel said during a meeting. "If this thing is alive, or at least connected to something alive, we need to try talking back." Laura nodded, her earlier fear replaced by determination. "But how? We don't even know if it understands us." "We have to start somewhere," Rachel replied. She suggested using sound, simple patterns of tones and rhythms, to see if the orb would respond. Alan was skeptical, but agreed to help set up the equipment. If nothing else, he hoped it would prove the orb wasn't as intelligent as Laura believed. For hours, the team worked together, creating sequences of sounds and playing them near the orb. At first, there was no reaction. The orb remained still, its faint glow unchanged. Just as frustration began to creep in, something shifted. The orb's light brightened suddenly, and a low hum filled the room. The hum grew louder, matching the rhythm of the sounds they had played. "It's responding," Laura exclaimed, her voice tinged with excitement. Encouraged, the team continued experimenting. They adjusted the tones, added pauses, and layered different pitches. Each time the orb reacted, its glow pulsing in sync with the sounds. It was as if it was learning, or teaching. Rachel decided to take the next step. She sat close to the orb, closed her eyes, and focused on forming a mental image in her mind. She pictured Earth, its blue oceans and green lands, and imagined humanity living peacefully among the stars. When she opened her eyes, the orb's glow had changed. It now shimmered with soft blues and greens, mirroring the colors of her vision. "It sees us," Rachel whispered. "It knows what we're trying to say." Over the next few days, the team deepened their attempts to communicate. They shared stories through images and emotions, showing glimpses of human history, the good and the bad. In return, the orb responded with flashes of memory from the silence past. The team saw moments of unity, cooperation, and sacrifice, but also pain and loss. Slowly, they began to understand why the silence had chosen extinction over conflict. One evening, as Rachel sat alone with the orb, she felt a strange pull, a sense that it wanted her to do more. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand on its surface. Instantaneously, she was flooded with sensations unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She saw herself standing on a distant planet, surrounded by beings who radiated warmth and wisdom. They weren't the silence. They were something else, older and far greater. These beings spoke without words, conveying thoughts directly into her mind. "You are young," they seemed to say, "but you carry potential. Choose wisely." When Rachel came back to herself, tears streamed down her face. She realized the orb wasn't just a relic of the silence. It was a bridge connecting humanity to something much larger. Whatever choice they made would ripple across the galaxy. The next morning, Rachel shared what she'd experienced. The team listened in silence, their faces reflecting a mix of awe and fear. For the first time, they truly understood the stakes. This wasn't just about Europa or even Earth. It was about the future of all life. "We can't let fear guide us," Laura said finally. "We've been given a chance to prove we're better than our ancestors. Let's not waste it." No one disagreed. Together, they prepared to send a message, not just to the orb, but to the universe. A message of hope, of change, of promise. Whatever happened next, they would face it as one. The message was ready. It wasn't in words or sounds, but in feelings, hope, regret, and the desire to grow. The team worked together to create it, combining their emotions into a single unified signal. They used the orb as a transmitter, sending the message out into the vastness of space. For hours they waited, unsure if anyone, or anything, would respond. Finally, the orb reacted. Its glow intensified, pulsing with colors that seemed alive. The room filled with warmth, and a sense of calm washed over everyone. Then, slowly, the light dimmed, and the hum faded away. The orb went still, its surface smooth and lifeless once more. "What just happened?" Ellen asked, breaking the silence. "I think we did it," Laura said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "They heard us." Rachel nodded, though she wasn't sure who they were. The silence, the ancient being she glimpsed in her vision, or something even greater, she didn't know, and maybe she never would. But one thing was clear: the connection had been made. The days that followed were quieter. The whispers stopped, and the strange occurrences in the station ceased altogether. It was as if the orb, and whatever consciousness it carried, had moved on. The team packed up their equipment and prepared to leave Europa, knowing their lives would never be the same. Back on Earth, news of the mission spread cautiously. Governments debated what to do with the information, while scientists argued over its meaning. Some dismissed the story as impossible, while others saw it as a turning point for humanity. Rachel became a reluctant spokesperson, sharing what she could without revealing too much. She emphasized one thing: the choice ahead was humanity's to make. Years later, Rachel returned to Europa alone. The research station was abandoned now, buried under layers of ice and time. She walked through its empty halls, remembering the fear, the arguments, and the hope that had bound them together. In the lab where the orb had been kept, she found faint traces of its glow etched into the walls, a reminder of what had happened. Standing there, Rachel felt a sense of peace. Humanity hadn't solved all its problems, but it had taken a step forward. The silence warning lingered, not as a threat, but as a guide. Their legacy lived on, not in the artifact, but in the hearts of those who had listened. As Rachel left the station, she glanced back one last time. Somewhere in the galaxy, a faint pulse echoed, a signal waiting to be answered. Whether humanity would rise to meet it remained to be seen. But for now, the possibility of change was enough. And so, the silence became a legend, a story whispered in quiet moments, a reminder of what humanity could lose or gain.